get you caught up on all the Chicago Bears news next on the Unbearable Sports Podcast.
I'm going to take the North and never give it back.
So that's a good pick. You get the corner. I got to go bold, right? I got to go bold for this.
Yeah, she's got some nice.
Welcome back to the Unbearable Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Brad Barron. Make sure to like and subscribe if you're out there on YouTube, and also rate the show 5 stars everywhere that you get your podcast. What's going on, everybody? It has been a while. As you can maybe hear from my voice, a little under the weather. Lots of stuff going on, so wasn't able to get to as many shows as I wanted to this week. But don't worry, we got you covered because tomorrow we'll be breaking down the Senior Bowl. I want to make sure that I got my profiles all set up. Like, for those that have seen our draft coverage, we got all the different profiles and deep dives. So I want to make sure that I watch them outside of the Senior Bowl as well, just to see if the tape matches what we saw with the Senior Bowl and the different practices. So make sure to stay tuned, and I'll have my winners from the Senior Bowl for us to look out for, because we know that Ryan Poles loves the Senior Bowl. So what I really want to go through, because I think I was out for the entire week, I want to just go through some of these coaching hires and talk a little bit more about that, because just like what we saw with some of the first coaching hires that the Bears made, there's kind of a little common trend with these coaches. So I want to talk about those and also kind of break them down, right? Is there a coaching hire that you're really excited about that the Bears made? We know down below in the comments. But let's go to the big one. The big news that was broken. Eric Bieniemy is going to be the Chicago Bears running backs coach. Now, this one, I was excited. When I first saw this, I'm like, all right, this is great. Because you look at Eric Bieniemy's record and his coaching resume speaks for himself. This is someone that we've talked about last year as an offensive coordinator candidate, and also someone who has been discussed as a potential head coach candidate. Now, why is he all of a sudden the running backs coach? And this, I'll say the same stuff that we've always said about Eric Bieniemy, because he's got the resume, but for some reason, I want to know what he says during these interviews, because what does he say to other people? Because for some reason, he seems to be going down the ladder rather than up the ladder. Because you see, he was a running backs coach out at Colorado, UCLA, and then also for the Vikings. Now, a lot has come out about Eric Bieniemy holding people accountable, which is something that we absolutely love. Hopefully he yells at Swift if Swift does not hit the correct hole. But other experience that he had, Colorado as the OC, then goes back to Kansas City for 4 years as the running backs coach, then was the offensive coordinator when Matt Nagy left, and then basically was dismissed, or was left Kansas City, and then now we have Matt Nagy as the actual offensive coordinator, and then he goes over to the Washington Commanders, kind of seen as a mutual parting of ways so that he can split away and say, hey, you know what? I'm going over with Ron Rivera over to the Washington Commanders. I'll be his OC, his assistant head coach, because the big talk was that Bieniemy was going to be the next head coach somewhere. And obviously that did not happen. So assistant head coach with the Commanders, they don't have a good season, and he is let go with the rest of the regime, goes over to UCLA as an assistant head coach and offensive coordinator. And over there, the offense ranked 117th in yards per game and 126 in points scored per game, and was dismissed by the team December 5th. So the latest stop didn't seem great. And when you look at also what he did with the Washington Commanders, they ranked 21st in average yards per game. On the flip side of that, he had Sam Howell at quarterback, who threw for 3,946 yards, and Brian Robinson and Antonio Gibson both averaging over 4 yards a carry. So one would argue he didn't have the horses out in Washington. But I still go back to, right? He's a running backs coach, right? It's someone very, very qualified for the position. I still go, in my opinion, I don't have a concern about him coaching running backs. I have more of a, what's going on at some of these places, right? It's kind of like it's that Brian Flores thing where they're like, okay, well, Brian Flores at Miami, bad things were happening. Now, I haven't heard that bad things with Eric Bieniemy, but it just gets you going like, why haven't you been a head coach if you have this tremendous background? And like we said, you're kind of like going down the chain. You got dismissed by the UCLA team. Those are just little things that pop up. But still, as a running backs coach, very obviously very qualified for the position. So I'm happy about it. But I wanted to just throw those out there. I know some people don't like hearing that stuff, but it's the honest truth. I don't know what to tell you. So let's go over to Press Taylor, where this one had more eyebrow raises, because Press Taylor is someone that a lot of fans credit him to kind of the downfall of the Jags, credit him to the downfall of the Eagles and other things like that. Now, this is another person that he's coming in as the Bears passing game coordinator, not specifically with any position group or anything like that. Press Taylor's coming in, and you look at he's basically always been around the Jags, the Eagles, and the former head coach for the Jags. Completely blanking on the name right now. Someone's going to correct me in the comments, but he's gone around with them. Doug. He's gone around with Doug Peterson, and that's the thing that I think why the Bears wanted to bring him over is what we're seeing with their offensive coach hires. When we look at like all the different offensive coaches they've brought in, you have Bieniemy, who's from the Andy Reid coaching tree. You have Press Taylor from Doug Peterson. Then you also have Declan Doyle coming over from the Saints and the Denver Broncos with Sean Payton. And then obviously you have the Lions people coming over with Ben Johnson. So, and then Jim Dray, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But what I feel like we're seeing here is he wants to bring in these different offensive minds that are thinking about things in different ways. Bieniemy with the experience with Andy Reid, and then Doug Peterson's offense being similar, but not the exact same as what Eric Bieniemy would be used to. So I think he's just trying to, in my opinion, I think he's trying to bring in different offensive minds because he's, like he said, scrapping the playbook. I've heard other reports that, hey, Ben Johnson can do this. Like, he's really good at combining a lot of different systems and schemes together. So it's not just, he runs an outside zone with kind of a West Coast influence. He wants to build his own playbook and bring in all these people to have different says in it. Now, the one thing that I do want to just point out is you can't have too many cooks in the kitchen. So hopefully he just is simply grabbing some of the top plays from some of these people. But Press Taylor, a lot of experience, like we said, with the quarterbacks coach for the Eagles and OC at Jacksonville, but did come with a lot of that scrutiny. So yet again, not a super high up position, but it is someone that has some experience that can potentially help out a Declan Doyle. So now let's flip over to Jim Dray, the one person that they ended up keeping, the tight ends coach for the Chicago Bears, which is kind of ironic because you don't really get a lot of production out of tight ends. Same thing with Declan Doyle. So maybe that's the sign of a good coach, not having the tight ends do too great. But Jim Dray stays over, and I know when we hired him initially as the tight end coach, kind of seemed to be very well respected. So Jim Dray stays on, and something that is kind of nice about a coach like this, especially on the offensive side of the ball, staying over. Same thing with like a Richard Hightower with the special teams. What's nice about coaches like this is that they can at least talk a little bit more about how this team is, what the vibe is in the locker room. Is there something that Ben Johnson or Declan Doyle should know about a specific group of people or anything like that? So I do like kind of a holdover, even though he hasn't been on the Bears for very long, but he's been on the Bears for now over a year at least. So that is one of the kind of odd, kind of keeps someone that they at least kept on to this staff. But Jim Dray is going to be on as the tight ends coach. Now next, Dan Roushar, ? The offensive line coach from Tulane. I put a question mark by him because it's not technically official. Now, I know some places out there claim that it's official, that they've heard news or stuff like that. It hasn't been officially reported by any of the big names like Brad Biggs or other people like that. It has not been officially reported, but like we've talked about, all signs kind of point to him being the offensive line coach for the Chicago Bears. Had experience over with the Saints, run game coordinator, tight ends coach. Maybe they want to bring him over as the run game coordinator. I would love that if him and Declan are on the same exact page, but also running backs coach with the Saints, tight ends coach with the Saints, offensive line coach with the Saints. lot of experience in that kind of Sean Payton system. So I think this would be a home run hire if and most likely when they officially make that hire. So don't look too much into him being the Tulane coach since 2023. He's really been around Sean Payton and understands that system. So with Declan Doyle being over here too, that seems like an amazing match. Yet again, you really want to make sure that that offensive line coach matches what your offensive coordinator, your play caller can do. So yet again, Declan's not going to be the one creating all these different plays and stuff like that. That's going to be up to Ben Johnson. But still, you kind of have this consistency across what you're trying to do with your coaching staff. And last but not least, the last person that I want to talk about is Bill Johnson. And all those out on YouTube, just look at that guy. That guy is a defensive line coach. And that's exactly what he was hired to do. Or actually, this is another one. It's official that he's going to be a Chicago Bears coach, but I haven't seen officially what he is. I think everyone's assuming defensive line coach. The great Wikipedia says defensive line coach. Don't trust everything you read out there, just so everyone knows. But it claims defensive line coach. I think everyone's kind of putting the dots together saying, hey, he was the defensive line coach for the Birmingham Stallions last year, the Houston Roughnecks. LSU was a defensive analyst, defensive line coach for LSU. At the Rams, defensive line coach, Saints, defensive line coach for 7 years. So this is someone who's been around these systems, and it does make sense for him to come over. Now, his exact title, like I said, we don't know yet. One would assume that he would be the defensive line coach, but he could be a higher up defensive assistant or something like that. Someone that Dennis Allen really does trust on that defensive staff. So we'll keep you covered on what Bill Johnson's exact title is and also when we officially hire on an offensive line coach. Like we said, most likely going to be Dan. And that, to me, like right now, how does everyone feel about this coaching staff? Because I think when you look at it, you go, okay, defense, Dennis Allen, Bill Johnson, Al Harris. That's a pretty good coaching staff so far. We're still looking at the linebackers and safeties coaches. But I think on the offensive side, it seems to be a home run. And I can't remember if I talked about the Declan Doyle pieces that I was at least hearing, because I was listening to all these different shows and different interviews talking about Declan Doyle. And the thing that the one piece that really stood out to me was someone said, Declan Doyle is the next Ben Johnson, right? And it's kind of funny because you go like, well, I don't want him to be the next Ben Johnson. You know, obviously that'd be great, but he's seen as kind of that up and coming grinder of tape that's going to just really kind of put in the hours and really just be a student of the game. And to me, that's what I love to hear. The only question from hearing everyone talk about Declan Doyle still stands. 28 years old. You're going into the room. You are not this former professional athlete, right? It's easier. Not going to lie, it's easier to command respect like a JT Barrett, someone that's like, hey, yeah, you all saw me play at Ohio State. You all kind of know who I am. I am a former quarterback, someone like you, right? Like I'm a quarterback that was in the NFL. You know who I am. Declan Doyle, not so much. That's going to be the question for me. Can Declan control that room as an offensive coordinator? Does he command respect? Do people then say, hey, this guy knows what he's talking about? Okay, hats off, right? So that's my overall feeling. Like I said, let me know what you think down below in the comments. And tomorrow, I'll be breaking down the Senior Bowl, talking about the biggest risers and people that we need to be looking out for as Chicago Bears fans. So make sure to hit that like button, subscribe out there, hit the bell so that you know when we're going to be live next. And also, download the podcast and rate it 5 stars everywhere that you get your podcast. And with that, Unbearable Sports Podcast, we are out.
Yeah, she's got some nice long hair and you know that she's a